This is Undaunted.Life, a man's podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Let's get into it. Make a joyful noise unto the Lord, all ye lands. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come before his presence with singing. Know ye that the Lord, he is God. It is he that hath made us, and not we ourselves. We are his people, and the sheep of his pasture. Enter into the gates with thanksgiving, and into his courts with praise. Be thankful unto him, and bless his name. For the Lord is good. His mercy is everlasting, and his truth endureth to all generations. That's Psalm 100, guys, the first 5 verses. And yeah, I read it in the King James Version because I thought it sounded awesome. So it's awesome in all versions, but the King James was especially awesome. Guys, we got a lot of ground to cover today, but did want to give a quick thank you to our donors. Guys, we're a donation-based ministry. If you want to know how we're able to get content like this out to guys all over the globe, how did we become the #1 podcast for Christian men in the world? It's because we have donors. We have guys just like you that have hopped on board and decided to support us on a monthly basis. Also, I asked you guys to be leaving a review, but also be sharing this with a friend. So I've heard a lot recently about like, oh yeah, I was telling this guy he was looking for some good content for men that wasn't, kind of squishy like some of this other men's ministry content, and they shared my show with them. That's what we need, guys. So for this show to continue to grow, don't hide us from other people. Guys have a terrible habit of doing that. You find like a band or a movie or a show, and then you're like, oh, that's awesome, and then you don't tell anyone about it. If you like this show, if you think it's a 5-star show, don't just leave us a 5-star review. Also share this with a friend. So we're covering a lot of ground today because we got a quick hitters bonanza, because I did an episode just about us losing a foxhole member and a brown belt the last time I did a solo episode. So it's just been a whole bunch of stuff that's been piling up that I need to talk about. So here's what we're going to be talking about in the quick hitters today. Gen Z men and boys flocking back to churches. Famous and influential pastor Steven Lawson blowing up his life and ministry because of an affair with a woman in her 20s. Collegiate women's volleyball programs finally standing up against the harmful gender revolution. Kamala Harris's husband being accused of hitting his ex-girlfriend. Kamala's appearance on a popular sex podcast. Democrats lying about the details around a Georgia woman's death following an abortion. Former First Lady Melania Trump coming out as fully pro-abortion a month before the election. Kamala saying that she would nuke the filibuster in order to force federal abortion protections. An Afghan national with plans to carry out a terrorist attack on Election Day arrested by authorities in Oklahoma City. Biden waiting a week before surveying the damage from Hurricane Helene. The U.S. government warning that it does not have enough funds to last through hurricane season. Pope Francis continuing to be a feckless heretic. Israel pulling off one of the most amazing missions in modern warfare history. Joe Biden running the first presidential cabinet meeting in almost a year, and the most unintentionally hilarious political advertisement in history. But before we get there, it's episode 666, guys. 666. Ooh, it's weird. It's crazy, right? We're near the Halloween season, and we got episode 666. I wonder if we planned this. Well, no, we didn't really plan this, but I know there's a lot of uneasiness with the number 666. I know there are a lot of Christians that if they get a license plate that has the number 666, or they are looking to get an apartment, it's got the apartment number 666, that they won't do that. And look, I understand that, mark of the beast, the whole 9 yards. I completely get it. But at the end of the day, it is just a number. And so I will tell you that I did honestly think about skipping that. And so for the first time in the history of this show, in over 600 episodes, having one that was like technically missing. But I decided to just lean into it because I've wanted to talk about this subject matter for a while. So as you know, if you listen to the show, obviously, if you listen to the introduction of the show, I like metal music. I've always liked metal music. Even when I was a little kid, I remember when I first discovered Metallica. That was like the first kind of heavy band that I discovered at that time. And then, youth group at the church, some guys gave me some CDs, Zayo and Living Sacrifice and Society's Finest. And so I really got into metal. And then not just metal, getting into Christian underground metal as a teen. So I went to a lot of shows that were maybe 100 people, right? But these were 100 people that knew every word of the song and, would sing along and mosh and do the whole thing. And so that was really my scene. I really enjoyed going to those shows. And whenever I was creating the show, I was like, I don't want just random bumper music that you get from some, website where you can get just music for free. That's not, I'm trying to think of the word where, it's not owned by somebody or something like that. Somebody else doesn't have the rights. It's just, free music or whatever. I wanted it to be, better than that. And so reached out to August Burns Red, and I've used their music for the intro outro music. I've used Holy Names music for the last year or two. And that's just what I like. I like the sound of it. But what's funny about that is most of the complaints I get, I get complaints about my tone and how fast I talk and stuff like that. But a lot of the complaints that I've gotten about this show over the years, and even a lot of the 1-star reviews, that's why, again, we need you guys to leave 5-star reviews, is because of the metal music in the intro and the outro. Like, I remember hearing people say, yeah, I was going to try out Kyle's show, but I listened to the intro music and it just was like, that's not really my thing. So 15 to 20 seconds of music that you don't prefer is worth skipping an hour's worth of content to some people. So the number one complaint, if we get specific about the complaint, the number one complaint that I've gotten since 2017 when I launched the show as it pertains to the intro, outro music and just metal music in general is this. It sounds demonic. It sounds satanic. That's what people have left in the comments. That's what people have told me in person, different things like that. But that commentary begs a question. What precisely do demons sound like? What exactly does Satan sound like? Because when you say something like it sounds demonic or it sounds satanic, it's presuming that you know what demons and Satan actually sounds like. And the truth is you have no friggin' idea. You have no idea whatsoever. What you have are depictions from other people about what they think demons would sound like, but they don't actually know either, right? So you've got horror films or different things like that, different pieces of entertainment where they will depict like this screeching, squealing type of demonic thing, but no one actually knows what they sound like. But then these people will also go further and say, oh, it doesn't just sound satanic. They'll say the imagery that these bands use is clearly satanic. And so it reminded me of some bands. So Impending Doom is a Christian death metal band or deathcore band. They have artwork that they released with one of their albums back in the day. It was the repentagram. So when you just look at it at a glance, it looks like a pentagram or a demonic figure or design or something like that. But to them, it's the repentagram. It's literally the opposite of the pentagram. And they use that as a chance to share the gospel with people at shows. A band called Oh Sleeper, they have a pentagram as their logo, but it's missing the top 2 points. So if you think about a pentagram, it's like an upside down star, right, with a circle. It's missing the top 2 points. Why do they have that? Well, they have a song called The Finisher, which is from the perspective of God talking to Satan. And at the end of that song, no spoiler alert here, you should go and listen to it. You should have listened to it already. It's God cutting off Satan's horns. So that's where that comes from, right? Then you've got Holy Name. So I remember sharing some videos from Holy Name, and people were like, oh, I can't believe you're supporting a band like this. They have skulls in the background during their live recording, because during the live recording, they did this live in Chicago thing when they recorded their stuff live. It's fantastic. They had all this, this projector in the back. And so they just had like images scrolling, and a lot of the images had skulls on it. And people were like, well, skulls are clearly demonic. I was like, are they? Or are they part of the skeletal structure of human beings, which is what was shown there, human skulls? It's part of our skeletal structure that God came up with, but it's satanic somehow. And then there's a band, Convictions, back in the day. I had Mike on, the lead singer, a few years ago, but they were selling a shirt with an upside down cross. Now, there are a lot of people in the metal world that would do an upside down cross, almost like, with OU fans or anyone that hates the University of Texas. So Texas is, the horns, hook 'em horns or whatever. And so people will go horns down. They're like, oh, look, we're so unique. And oh, look at us, we're doing horns down. But that's literally what people would use. It's like the inversion of the cross. But Convictions is like, no. Atheists and satanic people, like, they don't own the upside down cross symbol. We do, because of people that were crucified upside down because they didn't see themselves worthy of being crucified in the same way as their Savior. So that's, the Apostle Peter. But here's something in this entire subject matter that is actually, it's really rich. The same people that chastise people like me for listening to metal music because they think the entire genre is satanic, these are the same jackwagons that will listen to and allow their children to listen to modern pop music and hip hop music. Now, it doesn't take a genius to figure out why letting your children listen to most hip hop and rap is a bad idea, because, the glorification of out of wedlock sex and drug use and violence and killing and all the things that are kind of part of that genre, in most songs in that genre anyway. But you might have been surprised to hear me mention pop. Kyle, isn't pop music just, fun songs about being happy and all that? And to which I would say, obviously, there are some songs like that. But for the most part, have you ever paid attention to the lyrics of pop songs that you're singing along to while riding along in the car with your kids? Because much of the music in the pop genre that is, safe for everybody, supposedly, focuses on sex and drugs. And if you don't believe me, turn to the top 40 station on the way home today from work and just listen to the lyrics. Like, actually listen to lyrics. Don't hum along. Don't, tap to the beat. Just try to listen to the lyrics. And guys, with a lot of pop songs, and this has been this way for a long time, this isn't just a modern phenomenon. If they aren't talking about sex and drugs, they're certainly not talking about things that are pleasing and glorifying to God. So I remember being chastised for listening to quote unquote satanic metal music. I remember this exact moment. I remember getting talked to by a couple of people. They were chastising me for listening to this music because, metal music is just satanic, right? But this person listens to Taylor Swift, and they allow their children to listen to Taylor Swift. So what's wrong with Taylor Swift? She's the biggest pop star on the planet right now. She's literally a billionaire. So just to name a few things, she got her start in music by writing, angsty teenage girl songs about relationship problems, right? But now she's in her mid-30s, and she's still writing and performing new angsty teenage girl songs about relationship problems. So she's not really evolving as an artist, so that's just one thing. But also, she is a role model to tens, if not hundreds of millions of low discernment women and girls around the globe. So when she bounces around from one sexual partner to another and does so publicly and then writes songs about that, those girls see that and think that it's okay, that it's moral. And you've maybe seen clips of this, during her big, Eras tour thing that, went around the globe, the highest grossing tour of all time. She would get a stadium full of, 100,000 people, mainly women and girls, to scream, F the patriarchy. But they actually use, the word, but they would say F the patriarchy, right? During one of her songs. And those girls actually think they're under the boot of this supposed patriarchy. Why? Because Taylor Swift says so. But yeah, sure, I'm the problem because I listen to aggressive sounding music. Okay, got it. Now, at this point, I think it's right to point out some obvious things here as we kind of elucidate this further. There are certainly metal bands that are satanic. There literally are bands in the genre of metal that make music in order to glorify Satan, or they make music to glorify Satanism. So Satanism is not actually the worship of Satan in most forms. It's actually essentially a form of atheism. These people don't believe in Satan or God, right? It's just it's colloquially, described under Satanism. So yes, that's true. Those bands exist. However, just because those bands exist inside that genre does not mean that the entire genre is irredeemably satanic. Because duh. But just let me put a finer point on it if that didn't really land with you. If you hear a metal song of any kind and you think to yourself, demonic, satanic, what you're inherently postulating is that there are certain sounds that God, that created the cosmos, has no control over. There are sounds that cannot be redeemed. There are sounds that cannot, under any circumstances, be used to worship God. I remember one of the early, bits of negative feedback I got about metal music was someone saying, how can you listen to music with demon notes? They use the words demon notes. Like there are certain notes in music. And again, I'm not a musician, so I can't read sheet music or any of that kind of stuff. But this person says that there are notes that are in and of themselves demonic. So what this person's telling me, what anybody else that would agree with anything tied to that person is telling me, is that there are certain vocal performance types and guitar riffs and bass lines and drum beats that under no circumstances can be put together in a way that can lead to the worship of God. Like, really? Like, that's your argument? Because it doesn't sound good to you when you listen to it? That it can't possibly be used for God's good? So, guys, part of the problem is that any of you that agree with this kind of line of ideology, right, if you haven't turned this off already, any of you that believe in this, you've bought the contemporary Christian music industry lie that worship music sounds a particular way. That it can't be called worship music if it doesn't sound like this, if it's not played on K-Love or Air One or something like that. And here's the thing, our churches have done us no favors in this department either, because the only kinds of music that you ever hear offered to the congregations is somewhere between hymns and modern contemporary Christian music. That's essentially what you get. Hymns all the way up to modern contemporary Christian music. But to assume and to maintain that the only music that could possibly be used by Christians as an act of worship to God is somewhere between hymns and modern Christian contemporary music is ignorantly short-sighted. So like if your band at your church isn't playing CCM, right, then there's no worship happening in that moment. Like, guys, I remember being at metal shows with bands that were legitimately Christian, that had legitimately theologically correct lyrics. And I remember being in a state where I felt like I was worshiping God, right? So some of you out there think that if you're at a church service and your hands aren't up and you're not falling out in the aisle, that somehow you're not saved. Remember that worship leader I told you about years ago when I told him I didn't like contemporary Christian music? And this guy was like, yeah, that means you're probably not saved. And I'm like, are you out of your mind? Like, what is wrong with you? How could somebody even get that ideology? Guys, there are certain churches that they just don't do the hand raise thing. They don't do the tambourine thing. They don't do the, waving the wands thing or whatever people do. That's just certain styles of worship and certain styles of music. And now this next part is really going to make some of you mad. As there are legitimately satanic metal bands, as I've already said, because of course there are also legitimately satanic Christian bands as well. Whoa! Did he just say that? Yes. There are legitimately satanic Christian bands as well. It's obviously true, guys, because it's not a contradiction to say that there are satanic Christian bands, because there are people, guys, I promise you, there are people on the top Christian music charts right now. Go to Billboard, go to Apple Music, go to Spotify. There are people in those top charts right now in the Christian category that are not, in fact, Christians. And they know they're not Christians. These aren't people that you are maybe convinced they were Christians because they went to like a Baptist church camp or because they got whipped up by a TED Talk sermon or something like that and raised their hand. No, there are people that know that they have not put their faith in Christ for the propitiation of their sin debt, and yet they are making a mint off of creating music for Christians like you and mainly Christian women to consume. Also, guys, think about it this way. There are some Christian bands where maybe the singer is in fact a Christian, right? But some, if not all, the people that are in the band are not Christians. There are some, if not all, people that are part of the production and the road crew that are not Christians. There are some, if not all, people that are part of the record label or the production side of the actual music, the recording of it, that are not Christians. So is the music actually Christian music? Can you safely say that, yes, this is Christian music? Again, you guys seem to be just making the rules up as you go along here, but I'm serious. If everyone who has fingerprints on that song is not a Christian, then can we even call it a Christian song? Where does it start or stop? Do we just, evaluate the end product or the whole enchilada? Like, you see how quickly this unravels when you start really extrapolating out what people that maintain this worldview say and think? You see, because some of you that, when the sound of metal music hits your ears, you don't like it, okay? So some people, if they hear yodeling, if they hear techno, if they hear classical, it just hits their ear holes and they don't like it. But because some of you, when that happens with metal music, you extrapolate that out to the entire genre and conclude, albeit idiotically, that there is zero chance that Christians could have a place in the genre. But I've got a challenge for you, actually. I defy you to dive into the music and lyrics of just this handful of bands. These are bands that just came off the top of my head when I was preparing the episode, and make an argument to me that they are in fact satanic or demonically influenced. So the bands are Holy Name. That's the current intro-outro music for this podcast. For Today, so that's Maddie Montgomery's old band that's not around anymore, so he's a pastor out of Tennessee. The band Convictions. Again, we've had Mike the singer on this show before. The band Impending Doom. And there's another band called Reformed. Holy Name, For Today, Convictions, Impending Doom, Reformed. If you want to prove to me that this genre as a whole is actually satanic, listen to those lyrics. And especially since I know 95% of the people listening to this right now are men. When you listen to songs by these bands with the lyrical content by these bands, as a man, it does something different to you than listening to Top 40 Christian. Okay? And look, guys, I'm not anti Top 40 Christian. I mean, just this morning, let me look what I had open. Okay, I was listening to Phil Wickham. It's his I Believe album, but it's the hometown version. The hometown version. So I was just listening to that. It was just like It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. And so the guys with Holy Name, For Today, Convictions, Impending Doom, and Reformed, these bands are brutal. Yes, they are very, very aggressive. But lyrically, I would put much of their catalogs up against some of the vapid drivel that you can find on the top Christian contemporary music charts right now. Okay? And here's another thing. As I've talked about before, some men just can't get into contemporary Christian music, right? I did, what was that episode called? Hold on. I'm literally doing this live, so I used to have it memorized, but there's an entire episode I did about it. Please hold. Some of you are like screaming out the episode title because you know which one I'm talking about. I think it's maybe 176. Boom, 176. So if you go to episode 176 of this podcast, it's called Contemporary Worship Music is for Women and Effeminate Men. Okay? Go listen to that if you want to kind of hear me elucidate this entire topic a little bit, okay? But there are people that think that if you don't like that music, that you're not saved, like I've already talked about. But I would say for a lot of men that don't like contemporary Christian music, it just doesn't really agree with their, palate. It's not because they're emotionally closed off. It's not because they're not saved. It might just be because they don't get it. Have you ever thought of that? It might just be because they don't like the way the music sounds when it hits their ear holes, right? Like some people hear the sound of a banjo and they're like, that's awesome. Some people hear that and they're like, nails on a chalkboard, right? It's just the way it hits their ears. It might just be that these men don't like and don't want some breathy dude repeating the chorus and the bridge 87 times over and over and over and over and over. But many of these men have found a home and found a way to worship God when they found legitimately Christian metal music. And to chastise these men, to chastise them for their own personal taste that God put there, it's ridiculous. I don't understand it. So here's my ultimate point with this. I don't care what genres of music you prefer, but please stop demonizing. Yes, I'm using that word on purpose. Please stop demonizing people that prefer a different style of music than you do. Because you've heard me talk about the altar music. So that's Matty Montgomery's band at his church, the altar there in Johnson City, Tennessee. It's kind of a bluegrass band, bluegrass folky band. So that's not going to get played on Christian radio. Is that not worship music either? And listen, as it pertains to metal, guys, I do get it. You don't like the screaming vocals. You don't like fast guitars. You don't like double bass. You don't like music that you can't slow down in your brain and understand. Like, I do get it. But to categorize an entire genre as satanic just because you don't like it is incredibly, incredibly foolish. Guys, I mean, over the years, I've heard a ton of negative feedback to different types of music from so-called Christians that aren't even talking about metal, right? People in the Church of Christ, right? They think that there shouldn't be any musical accompaniment during worship at all, right? And they say that because they're trying to make the church as close to the first century church as possible, and they don't see in the Bible where the first century church had musical instruments. But you know what also wasn't described in the first century church that all modern Church of Christ churches have? Electricity, right? Lights, plumbing, indoor plumbing, microphones, like speakers, projection, doesn't have any of that, but all these churches seem to have that, and that's okay. I've also heard people say that rap and hip hop as genres are irredeemable and that they should be avoided by Christians. And yet there are people in that genre making very theologically astute and correct music in that genre. I've also heard, guys, this might sound crazy to you, but I've also heard that drum beats of any kind are irredeemable because drums are used to put people in a, pulsating trance-like state. It goes back to like tribal times, like pagan times. So we can't use drum beats, right? Are all those dorks that said those things right too? Because guys, let me just say that if you think that there are sounds that God can't redeem, then you have an incredibly, incredibly small view of God. And guys, do you know what's on Satan's Spotify playlist? Like, have you ever really thought about that? Because when people are like, well, this is clearly satanic, I'm like, I wonder what Satan listens to. And the conclusion I came to about what Satan would listen to on his playlist is any music that pushes people away from God. Any music that distracts you away from the Father. It's not metal as a genre. It's not rap as a genre. It's not any, music made by Christians around the world that relate to their local tastes and preferred sounds and instruments and musical arrangements. It's not any of that. It's any music that pushes someone made in the image of God away from their Creator. So let's go back to Psalm 100, the very first part, the first verse. Make a joyful noise unto the Lord. So here's a question. What makes you qualified to decide what is and what is not a joyful noise unto the Lord? The answer is you're not qualified. So stop acting like you are. Hey guys, real quick. I know a lot of you guys are really doing everything you can to have a consistent workout routine, but the problem is you work out at a Globo gym. And so there's 17 guys on the bench that you need, and there's people doing bicep curls on the squat rack. And the biggest problem is not your schedule. It's actually where you're trying to get your work in. How about you guys stop making excuses and build yourself a home gym? And when you do, make sure you use Sorinex. So Sorinex is a family-owned and operated business that builds some of the most impressive workout facilities in the entire world. They built gyms for teams in the NFL, MLB, NBA, NHL, and even the UFC. They've also built gyms for some of the biggest and most successful collegiate and high school athletic programs in the country. But in addition to that, they make the highest quality home gym products that I've ever seen on the market. In my personal home gym, I have the Sorinex Outfitter Rack, the heavy version in military green. Also, I have some of their center mass bells. I've got their Nordic glute ham developer and their patented landmine attached to my rack. So guys, stop fighting the riffraff at your local gym or bench or squat rack or whatever. And if you're going to build out a home gym, you may as well get one that will last you and one that you could even pass down to your kids. Begin your build out by going to Sorinex.com. That is Sorinex.com, Sorinex.com. Take control of where and when you work out, Sorinex.com. All right, guys, I already told you, quick hitters, bonanza. We'll try to go through these quickly while still digging in. Gen Z men and boys flocking back to churches. Obviously, I love this. So this is according to Fox News. A piece recently published in the New York Times offered a glimpse inside the church, a Southern Baptist congregation where 4 of the 5 musicians on stage and the majority of the college students seated in the pews were young men. The scene depicts an emerging trend, the piece says. For the first time in modern American history, young men are now more religious than their female peers. They attend services more often and are more likely to identify as religious. Compare that to the number of young women reportedly leaving in droves. Earlier this year, the Survey Center on American Life reported much of the same. Men had for ages been the group considered less religiously affiliated. A new survey reveals that this pattern has now reversed, a post on the site read. So here's my big takeaway on this one. It's kind of a, good news, bad news takeaway. The good news is it's great to see so many men flocking to Christian churches and becoming politically conservative and all that. That's great. The bad news is it's terrible to see so many young women buy into the lies of second and third wave feminism. It's just absolutely terrible. And I guess you could throw fourth wave feminism in there as well. And just so you can kind of know, because I've used that term and I just kind of assume you guys understand, but it does require a little bit of explanation. Just in general, first wave feminism was about suffrage. Second wave feminism was about sexual liberation, right? Third wave feminism, which is basically, hey, we don't need men. We're better than men. We want the corner office, that kind of stuff. And fourth wave feminism, which is what we're kind of in now, it's still trying to define itself, but you could define it by one question. What is a woman? They're really struggling with that question because feminism and the transgender revolution, those things are butting heads and it's not really going well. And so I love seeing men saying, gosh, enough porn, enough masturbation, enough video games, enough Netflix. Like, I'm going to go to church. I'm going to go figure out what this is about. That's why I love so much that there are young men listening to this show. When I hear from guys that are teenagers or college students or something like that, I'm like, yes, let's freaking go, because I want to try to give you guys as much positive content as possible. I want to push you towards pastors like Joby Martin and Matt Chandler and guys that will actually kind of speak to the masculine heart. But goodness gracious, there's so many warning signs that we're seeing here, because as these young men become more godly, they're going to be looking for godly women, and godly women are fewer and farther in between now. Because they're being influenced by people like Taylor Swift. They're being influenced by feminists that are like, hey, you shouldn't have kids, or wait until you've established yourself in your career until you have kids, and now you're in your mid-30s and now you're having problems getting pregnant, and now there's all kinds of other issues. But all along the way, you're being encouraged to have a bunch of sexual encounters with a bunch of random men with no connections whatsoever, and that's absolutely destructive to women because it commodifies them. Gosh, it's just terrible. And inside of all of this, we have, the United States, we're below replacement rate on our birth rate, along with most of the West, except for Israel. And this becomes a major, major issue for us. But I would just say, to wrap up this one, is if you see a young man in your congregation that is untethered. So by that, I mean his family doesn't go there and he's not married or has kids there. He's just a solo guy going there by himself. I want y'all to be all over that dude in the best way possible. Offer him volunteer opportunities, invite him into discipleship opportunities, invite him to do everything that could possibly be done within the church. We need more of those guys, so let's keep watering those seeds that have been planted. All right, next one here. Famous and influential pastor Steve Lawson blowing up his life and ministry because of an affair with a woman in her 20s. So this is according to churchleaders.com. Executive Director of Grace to You and Grace Community Church, Elder Phil Johnson, shared more details regarding Dr. Steven Lawson's moral failure on social media Wednesday, September the 25th, in a post he has since deleted. Johnson, who is a friend of Lawson, clarified for his followers that Lawson did in fact inform the elders of his sin, but only after he was caught by the father of the woman he was having an inappropriate relationship with. Steve himself informed the elders, but only after the girl's father had confronted Steve and threatened exposure. This was not a noble confession of sin, Johnson wrote on X, formerly Twitter. Lawson was removed indefinitely from all ministry activities at Trinity Bible Church of Dallas last Thursday, that was September the 19th, by the elders. Lawson was the church's lead pastor. In a statement released by the Trinity Bible Church Dallas elders, they informed the public that Lawson's removal was due to an inappropriate relationship that he has had with a woman. So, just to be more clear, this was a woman in her 20s, and this dude's like in his late 70s. He might be in his early 80s, right? So this woman is more than half of a century younger than him, which there's not anything inherently wrong with that. The biggest problem was that Steve Lawson was married, right? He had made a covenant before God that he was going to become one flesh with one woman and no one else. So several big takeaways here, and we'll go fast with them. Number one, don't put your faith in man. How did I tell you guys this? Do not put your faith in me. Do not put your faith in your favorite pastors, your favorite politicians, your favorite celebrities, your favorite athletes. Do not put your faith in man. Steve Lawson was seemingly about as solid gets. He was like all you reform nerds, like, gosh, Steve Lawson was like your dude, right? Like you just absolutely loved him. And he was susceptible to this, which goes to the next big takeaway. And I forget who said it first. I think it was Joby. Monies and honeys, y'all. Monies and honeys. You have all these pastors being taken out because they're looking for more money and because somebody with honey dripping from their lips is enticing them. Come over here. Come over here. You deserve this. Your wife's not giving you what you need. I understand God's plan for marriage and fidelity, but come on over here. So Steve Lawson was not protected, which goes to my last big takeaway here, which is you are not unique, guys. Satan can take you out too. For those of you guys that are in ministry, that are in ministry at a high level, and I know there are guys listening to this show that are, or in business at a high level, or any of those types of things, why do you think you're special? Why do you think the monies and honeys aren't going to come for you? And I've used this example before. It's kind of, I guess you could call it explicit, but I've put myself in scenarios so that I can pre-decide. Again, I'm big on pre-decision, right? I don't wait until the morning to figure out if I'm going to work out. I pre-decided the night before that I'm going to work out the next morning, right? To pre-decide what I would do in the craziest of crazy situations. And I'll describe it again for those of you that may have forgotten. So I'm on the road, right? And if I'm on the road, it's because I'm speaking or doing something for Undaunted.Life. And let's say I'm exhausted, I'm tired, haven't been home in a while, so I haven't had sex in a while, and I don't look at porn and masturbate. So it's like I don't really have a way to ejaculate. I know, hey, guys, it's Undaunted.Life, a man's podcast. And I'm sitting at the bar and I've had a couple of whiskeys because there's nothing wrong with whiskey as long as you keep it under control. And then an absolute 10, a model level woman walks up, slides her room key over to me and says, meet me in my room in 10 minutes, daddy, and then walks off. I mean, we're talking 10 out of 10, everything that I've ever wanted physically in a woman, right? And you know what I've pre-decided in that moment? I don't say a word. I pull cash out of my wallet. I put it down to pay for my tab, which would probably be an abundant tip for this person. And I get the hell out of the hotel room immediately. I don't even go to my room just in case my room is on the same floor and on the same hallway as hers. I go call an Uber and I go say, hey, take me to Walgreens. I need to get a toothbrush and some toothpaste. And then I go check in at a different hotel and I come back the next day to get my crap. That's what I do. I've pre-decided in that most extreme of extreme scenarios that will likely never, ever, ever happen, how I would respond and how I would act. You know who I've told that to? My buddies, my foxhole. Hey, guys, I am not, pulled to the chemical. I'm pulled to the sexual. And so, I think Joby has said this before as well. This is great advice. He tells his elders, if Satan's going to take me out, it's going to be in these categories. For some people, it's money, gambling. Some people, it's, drug or alcohol abuse. For some people, it's violence, lying, voyeurism, sexual sin of all different kinds. And so if you know this about yourself, which I would guarantee that after 80 years of life that Steve Lawson knew this about himself, why didn't he tell anybody? Why didn't he travel with his wife? Why didn't he travel with another man? Like, I've been booked by speaking engagements where people are like, we require that men that travel to speak travel with their spouses or with another man, confidant of theirs. Why? Because holiness and purity sexually is so unbelievably important. Someone should have gave Steve Lawson the memo. All right, next one here. Collegiate women's volleyball programs finally standing up against the harmful gender revolution. So this is according to the New York Post. The University of Nevada, I think it was Nevada Reno, has issued a statement rebuking its women's volleyball team for forfeiting a match against a team that includes a transgender player. That is to say, a dude. In recent weeks, several schools have canceled matches against San Jose State, whose roster includes a transgender redshirt senior, Blair Fleming. Monday, players on Nevada's women's volleyball team issued a statement to Outkick announcing their decision to forfeit their October 26th match, overriding a previous decision from the university. We, the University of Nevada Reno women's volleyball team, forfeit against San Jose State University to stand united in solidarity with the volleyball teams of Southern Utah University, Boise State University, the University of Wyoming, and Utah State University, the statement said, referring to the other teams who have forfeited their matches. We demand that our right to safety and fair competition on the court be upheld. We refuse to participate in any match that advances injustice against female athletes. Guys, big takeaway on this one is finally, a group of young women is standing up for themselves. Guys, this is the way. They should forfeit every single one. And I know it goes down as a loss, but every single team that is opposite San Jose State in women's volleyball should forfeit. Even people on this dude's own team at San Jose State. They say, because this dude's 6'1", right? They say even at practice, they will avoid his spikes, right? Which if you're a volleyball player, you don't avoid the spike. You're actually trying to bump the spike back up, right? You're trying to get it to where you can play it on your side to set up for your side, your team to spike, that they will avoid it. Why do you think they're avoiding the spike? Maybe because it's a guy hitting the ball significantly harder than probably any woman on the planet can hit it. Yes, it is deeply unsafe, but even more than unsafe, it is unfair. And it may sound like I'm like chastising the women by saying, finally, these women are standing up. But it shouldn't have to be these women that stand up, actually, because their coaches should stand up for them. Because as a coach, as a leader, you're supposed to take the heat for your subordinates. And in a coach-player scenario, the player is the subordinate, right? But then you have the university, right? Because even the coach shouldn't have to stand up. The athletic director should be standing up, and the president of the university should be standing up. But the president of University of Nevada Reno came out and said, yeah, well, this doesn't reflect the opinions of the school, and we disagree with the volleyball player's decision. So basically what the University of Nevada Reno is saying is, we don't care about female athletes. We don't care about safety. We don't care about the injustice being done to them, and we certainly don't care about fairness. We care about seeming woke and seeming inclusive, right? But all along the way, there's been an abdication of responsibility. They've abdicated their responsibility to protect these young women. The parents are in there as well. It should not be these young women having to do that in these scenarios. Well, I guess, they're adults now. So, if it's in high school, their parents should be involved. But for them, yes, speak up, speak out. But coaches, you need to be taking the heat off. Athletic directors, you need to be taking the heat off. And then you get into the president, you get into the regents, you get into all these different boards. Absolutely, this is the way. All right, next quick hitter here. Kamala Harris's husband being accused of hitting his ex-girlfriend. So this is also according to the New York Post. Vice President Kamala Harris's husband is being accused of slapping his ex-girlfriend for flirting with a valet worker at a ritzy gala in 2012, a new report claims. Second gentleman Doug Inhofe, 59, supposedly struck his then-girlfriend, described as a successful New York attorney, in the face so hard that she spun around while in the valet line after an event at the Cannes Film Festival in May of 2012. The three unnamed friends of the woman reportedly told the Daily Mail. So here's big takeaways on this one. This guy, right, Doug Imhoff, this is the new form of masculinity that we're all supposed to be modeling ourselves after now. right? Because that's what he has being thrown out there. Like he's being thrown out there on the campaign trail right now to somehow appeal to masculine dudes. This doof, this beta male is the guy that we're supposed to model after. So if you take that seriously, is it okay to hit women? Is that what we're saying now, Democratic Party? Because Doug Emhoff is going on these shows and he's either not being asked about this at all, or he's being asked about it and he's completely sidestepping the question and he's not actually answering it or referring to it. And then obviously the next big takeaway here, and this is of course obvious, if a Republican woman were the candidate for president for the general election and her husband was accused of something like this, it would be the only headline in the country. There would be riots in the streets and there would be women on the streets with their pussy hats on demanding justice, demanding an investigation. Well, actually, they wouldn't demand an investigation. They would just believe the woman, right? Believe all women, right? As opposed to just believe some women that are believable. It's believe all women, right? And so this should be an enormous story. And again, I understand he's not running for office, but he's currently technically in office. He's the second gentleman as of right now. And if the second gentleman is okay with domestic assault or assaulting women in general, wouldn't it be something that the United States public should know about before they vote? I think so, but we're never going to get to the bottom of it. All right, next one, Kamala again. Kamala's appearance on a popular sex podcast. Okay, so this is according to Newsweek. Vice President Kamala Harris's recent appearance on the popular Call Her Daddy podcast has sparked controversy, with a poll showing the move may have backfired. Last week, Harris made a surprise appearance, this was a couple of weeks ago, on the popular podcast known for its frank discussions about sex and relationships, which sparked a backlash on social media. The interview is part of a media blitz by Harris, which includes appearances on CBS's 60 Minutes, The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, ABC's The View, as well as The Howard Stern Show. So let's talk about the show. So Call Her Daddy. Here's what I know about that show. I know that show is always in the top 5 and has been for years. Okay. I think there used to be 2 hosts and then there was like a split. I think they were not Outkick, Barstool or something like that. And then now the main host, Alex Cooper, she's just doing it by herself. But even if you don't listen to an entire show, because here's the thing, like Joe Rogan, who's typically number 1, 2, or 3 on the rankings of podcasts around the globe, you cannot listen to a single episode of the Joe Rogan Experience and kind of get an idea of what the Joe Rogan Experience is about, because the clips are sent out everywhere, right? So you can just be scrolling your normal news feed and there will be something from the Joe Rogan Experience. Well, something similar happens with shows that are like this, that are so incredibly huge, you will at least see clips from that show. Every single clip of that show is Alex Cooper and her guests talking about the things that they've done sexually with other men. They talk about it flippantly, and they really get into very gory, nasty, explicit detail. Okay? So you have Kamala Harris go on this sex podcast, and it turns into a discussion about abortion, because why wouldn't it? Because if you're on a horse podcast, I'm assuming this woman has had abortions before, because I'm assuming, as she's described, having unprotected sex with a lot of different men and all her different experiences, I'm assuming that she got knocked up at some point. And so her and all of the low IQ and low discernment women in her audience would love to hear that the woman that could be the leader of the free world at some point is super duper pro killing babies, because they don't want to be safe when it comes to sex. They certainly don't want to have sex only within the covenant of marriage. They just want to have sex as much as possible. And if one of those consequences is a baby that's growing inside of them that they're charged to protect and raise up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, they definitely don't want that. They want options to be able to make that problem just kind of shoo and go away. So here's my big takeaway on this one. I guess you can fail upwards being a whore. I might seem a little bit rough, but here we are. Kamala Harris, as we're not allowed to really talk about because it's rude somehow, she got her start in politics by being the side chick of then mayor of San Francisco, Willie Brown. That's how she got, like, she was like his girlfriend, like she was his side piece. She would basically blow him and have sex with him, and then he would do favors for her. He literally got her a cush government job with a 6-figure pay because she was his side chick, right? That's how she got her start in politics. And she's just continued to fail upwards into the United States Senate and into the vice presidency and potentially into the White House, guys. And Alex Cooper is the same. Alex Cooper is not famous for being a media mogul. She's not famous for being an astute businesswoman. She's famous for being a whore. That's why anyone knows Alex Cooper's name. Because Alex Cooper would be just another whore that just sleeps with a bunch of random men because she's got daddy issues or problems or because she's a non-believer or whatever the situation is. But she is famous. She signed, I think the deal was $120 million podcast deal, a 9-figure podcast deal to be a whore into a microphone. And isn't it so interesting? I think she's engaged now, and she hid that from her followers from a very, very long time because everything on her show is about not ever needing a man and not ever getting married and sleeping with whoever you want to, whenever you want to, because there's no morality and you just do you, girl. And if that means doing a bunch of random strangers on a Friday night, who cares? Live your life. Live your best life, boo. That's her. And she's famous for that, which I think is indicative. Go back to the, Gen Z men flocking back to churches. Well, a lot of Gen Z women are flocking to morons like Alex Cooper and Kamala Harris. And they're basing the morality off of what they hear and see out of those two adults. So we'll see how that goes as we work our way into the future. All right, next quick hitter here. Democrats lying about the details around a Georgia woman's death following an abortion. This is an absolutely terrible story. But I want to read you some of the headlines first. Here are the headlines, and then see what, things that you would draw from that. Newsweek. Amber Thurman, first named preventable abortion death since bans. New York Times. It was only a matter of time before abortion bans killed someone. And then the AP, Associated Press. VP says woman's death after delayed abortion treatment shows consequences of Trump's actions. Let's actually go to the facts here. So here are the facts from the Daily Wire. Amber Thurman, a woman from Georgia whose pregnancy with twins was too far along to abort her in her home state, traveled to North Carolina where she was given a deadly abortion pill, a combination of mifepristone and misoprostol. The chemical abortion was incomplete, meaning her children or parts of them were still in her womb and she needed emergency room care, but doctors at the hospital in Georgia she turned to for help waited 20 hours to perform a surgical abortion. The young woman, a mother of six-year-old, also died in this process. So let's be very, very clear about this story. She wanted to get an abortion. She's already got a 6-year-old son. She wanted to kill the twin babies inside of her. And during the process, her babies did die inside of her, but pieces of them were not expelled from the womb because the combination of mifepristone and misoprostol, they not only kill the baby, but then they violently expel the dead baby parts from the womb. But some of the parts were still inside the woman, which is a very, very dangerous thing. You can go septic very easily. And that's apparently what happened. And so big takeaway here. Amber Thurman and her 2 unborn babies would be alive today if she had not tried to murder them. Okay? Why was she in an emergency room trying to get assistance? Because the babies were already dead. So people are like, oh, these women that have ectopic pregnancies or these women that have miscarriages, but the baby's still inside, they're not going to be able to get D&Cs where they go in and scrape out the lining. It's like, yes, they can. They can across the entire country because that's not illegal, you idiot. Because the baby is already dead. The tissue, the human tissue, the fetal tissue is still inside the woman. It has to be cleared out. You do that by doing a D&C, a dilation and curettage. That's how you do it, right? But if you do that while the baby's alive, that is abortion and that is murder. That is the killing of an innocent human life. And she and her 2 babies would be alive today if she had not tried to murder them. She is not dead because of Donald Trump. She is not dead because of Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito and Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett. She's not dead because of pro-life organizations. She's not dead because of vocally pro-life churches. She's not dead because of vocally pro-life podcasters. She is dead because she thought she could kill her babies and suffer no negative consequences. This is a tragedy, right? But it's not the tragedy that Democrats are playing. What they are trying to say and what they've convinced a lot of conservatives of is that what these laws are doing is causing pause in these medical facilities and in these doctors and emergency room places, that they're causing pause where what these people think and what they've convinced a lot of dumb people of is that here they are in the emergency room. They know exactly what they need to do to preserve this woman's life, but they're going to be consulting the internet or a lawyer or a team of legal scholars to figure out if they're allowed to do a D&C on a woman who has already killed her children. Literally none of that is happening. She died for the same reason that a lot of people die in the United States, and that is medical error, right? The number one leading cause of death in America every single year is abortion. Then you've got like heart disease, cancer, but then it's like medical issues, like where doctors make a mistake, surgeons make a mistake, nurses make a mistake. That's always in the top 5 as well. That's why Amber Thurman is dead. And guess what? Had she not tried to kill her babies, she would be alive today. That is a tragedy. Those 2 babies should be, I don't know if they would still be in gestation or if they would be, in the world and welcomed to the entire world at this point, but all 3 of them would be alive, and that is her fault. All right, next quick hitter here. Former First Lady Melania Trump coming out as fully pro-abortion a month before the election. Literally, this story hurts my brain. To the New York Post here. Former First Lady Melania Trump went public Thursday, this was a few Thursdays ago, with her support for abortion rights, releasing a video a day after her views were revealed in a leaked excerpt from her upcoming book. Individual freedom is a fundamental principle that I safeguard, Melania, 54, said in a 30-second clip posted on her social media accounts Thursday, promoting her soon-to-be-published book. Without a doubt, there's no room for compromise, when it comes to this essential right that all women possess from birth, individual freedom, she continued. Several big takeaways on this. First thing is, guys, I'm not absolutely convinced that the Trump team knew this was going to come out. Okay? Because if the gal who would be First Lady again is going to be helping the campaign in any way, you need her going out doing like puff piece interviews. If she's releasing a book, there needs to be nothing controversial in it as well. Basically, you release a book so you have something to talk about when you go on a radio show or morning talk show or some television program or something like that. So I'm not so sure that the Trump team really knew that she was doing this. It seems like Trump and Melania are really doing things separately. Kind of they have their own separate teams. They may have been caught unawares on this one. Next big takeaway is if the Trump team did know that this was going to come out, then they are colossal morons. This is like one of the dumbest things I've ever seen in a presidential election. And we're literally sitting in one of the dumbest times in presidential election history. Okay? Because here's the deal. Guys, this independent, undecided voter that is going to vote for Donald Trump if he signals moderation on abortion, that person doesn't exist. There certainly are not any Democrats, any liberal Democrats that are going to be changing their votes from Kamala Harris to Donald Trump because they're signaling moderation on abortion. Those people don't exist. And so the Trump team coming out and moderating on abortion, and Melania coming out and not even being moderate on abortion, she's coming out as completely okay with all abortion. She says there's no room for compromise when it comes to the essential right that all women possess, and that's individual freedom. The problem is, as I've pointed out a bunch, is we're not talking about an individual. We're talking about 2 individuals. There is the body of the woman, and then there's the body of the baby inside of her. We're talking about 2 people, not 1. And so the last takeaway here on this one is the only real outcome for something like this is that it will continue to alienate Republicans that are in their base and Christian pro-lifers. So I've heard it pointed out recently that in the last election in 2020, 30 million Christians did not vote in the election. 30 million adult Christians did not vote in the election. And, as Josh Howerton pointed out in a sermon that, you'll hear more about here on the show soon, he pointed out that it was tens of thousands of votes in a handful of states, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, that decided the 2020 election, right? And 30 million Christians sat on their hands. Because here's the thing, guys. I understand. Trump is saying things that you don't like. Trump is continuing to say things that you don't like. I totally understand it. But if you honestly believe that the Trump administration and the Harris administration would act the same on the issue of abortion, you're fooling yourself. Like, what is wrong with you? Like, the Trump team is, albeit foolishly, signaling moderation on the abortion issue, but legislatively, we have evidence to prove that they won't do that if they are governing. Because remember, I didn't think that Trump was significant or was legitimately conservative enough. That's why I didn't vote for him in 2016. And he ended up being very, very conservative, especially on the life issue. So they're signaling moderation, but will likely go back to the conservative side on that issue. The Harris-Walz administration is signaling wild left-wing crazy ideology, and they will likely govern even left of that. So Christians, if you think that you're doing everyone a favor by not voting for Trump on this, again, you need to reconsider, because the Harris-Walz administration would be the most pro-abortion administration in the history of this country, and there would not be a close second. All right, a lot of Kamala on this particular podcast today, but let's go to the next quick hitter. Kamala is saying that she would nuke the filibuster in order to do what? In order to force federal abortion protections. Here we go to NPR on September the 24th. Vice President Harris says she would support eliminating the filibuster in the United States Senate in order to bring back federal protections for a woman's right to an abortion as they existed under Roe v. Wade, which is actually not true. She would go way, way, way further than that. But back to the NPR report. Harris outlined her position during an interview Monday with Wisconsin Public Radio, saying that when it comes to the issue of abortion, she believes that the Senate should do away with the filibuster rule that requires a 60-vote threshold for most legislation to pass. I have been very clear. I think we should eliminate the filibuster for Roe and get us to a point where 51 votes would be what we need to actually put back in law the protections for the reproductive freedom and for the ability of every person and every woman to make decisions about their own body and not have their government tell them what to do. Harris said, blah, 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 blah. Right to the big takeaways here. Okay, guys, if she's elected and if she actually does this, if she actually does nuke the filibuster, do you think it'll actually stop at federal abortion law going back to what Roe said? No, it'll clearly go past that. They want to push it to what Illinois and Minnesota and California and New York have, where it's basically abortion up to the date of birth for any potential reason whatsoever and paid for by taxpayer dollars. But it's not going to stop there. If they remove the filibuster, then they're going to move to make Washington, D.C., right, the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico states. So that would give them basically 4 additional Democratic senators, leading to basically a permanent Democratic control of the United States Senate. They're going to go after term limits for Supreme Court justices, and they will also try to put in power that would not grandfather in current justices, but would actually bounce current justices like Thomas and Alito. They're going to go on to stacking the Supreme Court. So to go from 9 justices to however many they want, 15, a million, however many. Federal election law and control. So they're going to try to wrestle that completely away from the states, basically doing away with our federalist system. Blanket amnesty for illegal immigrants and or allowing non-citizens to vote in all elections, which would basically lead to the end of Republican chances in federal elections. Guys, that's what we're looking at. So back to what I was saying before. This is why Christians can't afford to sit on their hands on election day. I get it. You don't have a perfect candidate. Jesus is not on the ballot. I know you got your cute little Jesus 2024 sticker and yard sign and all that kind of stuff. All that's great. You still got to vote. You can't just plug your ears and cover up your eyes and just assume that everything's going to be okay. We do know that in the end, everything will be okay. It'll be as if every tear was never shed. There will be a new heavens and new earth. We do know that. But in the meantime, we have dominion. We have been given dominion over creation. Part of creation is the governmental system that we are allowed to vote in this country. Do not lose that responsibility. Our next one here, an Afghan national with plans to carry out a terrorist attack on Election Day was arrested by authorities in OKC. This is according to the Oklahoman. An Afghan national living in Oklahoma City was charged Tuesday with conspiring to conduct a terrorist attack on Election Day in the United States on behalf of ISIS. Nasir Ahmad Tawahidi, 27, was charged in Oklahoma City federal court. He and his brother-in-law were arrested Monday after they purchased 2 AK-47 rifles and ammunition from an undercover FBI employee in a rural location in Oklahoma, the FBI reported in a court affidavit. Tawahidi admitted after his arrest that he and his brother-in-law bought the guns to commit an attack on Election Day, targeting large gatherings of people, according to the affidavit. He said he and his brother-in-law expected to die on the November 5th attack and to be martyrs. Big takeaway on this one is actually just a question. Why were these 2 men even in this country? The initial reports were that they went through the SIV process whenever they were taken out of Afghanistan, and it's come to my attention this morning that they actually did not get vetted through the SIV process. So why were they here? Again, we don't know this yet. This is still developing. As I'm recording this, the week before it comes out. This is a developing story. Did they come through the wide open southern border? Is that possible? I would actually say it's more than possible. It's likely. And I'm happy to correct the record later if I'm proven wrong. But these aren't the only guys like this. We have terrorists on our terrorist watch list that we know are currently inside this country, but we don't know, or we're pretending like we don't know where they are precisely. And what do these Islamic fundamentalist terrorists want to do? Kill as many Americans as possible. Even better if they're Christians. Even better if they're right-wingers. So this is a guy in Oklahoma City, a red state. He was going to be in a red county, and he was going to try to kill as many Republicans as possible. Right? Luckily, he and his brother-in-law were stopped. But what if people aren't stopped? That's why I tell you guys all the time, keep your head on a swivel at church, right? I mean, I hate to even say this, but it's good. Maybe this will lead to some change. But I literally was walking in the hallway. This was like as a service was just starting. And so people were either in their Sunday school classes or in the service. And one of the cops is at the desk, which is one of the points of entry to our church. And I walked by him and he never even looked up at me. He was looking at his phone the entire time. So do you think I'm going to outsource my safety and security to these fat, out of shape and, seemingly uninterested officers that are being paid by my church to do the exact opposite of what they're doing, which is to actually be vigilant and protect us? Of course not. I'm not going to. Why in the world would I outsource to someone like that? Right? Even if those guys were astute and walking around and really getting after it, there's only so many of them. There's more points of entry than there are people that are currently covering those points of entry. So whether it's your church, whether it's your social club, whether it's your personal home, guys, be prepared and keep your head on a swivel. All right, next quick hitter here. Biden waiting a week before surveying the damage from Hurricane Helene. So this is, basically Hurricane Helene happens. It's absolutely devastating and terrible. And then 7 days later, okay, Joe Biden goes to some of the grounds. I think this was in North Carolina or perhaps Tennessee. I can't remember exactly where, but he actually goes onto the ground to survey the damage. So let's go to a couple of big takeaways here. I think that we should just, as a people, whether it's a Republican or Democrat, whether we voted for them or not, I think we should stop expecting or demanding that presidents survey the damage after a natural disaster. Guys, it just gums everything up because you have to stop flights in and out. You have to control the airspace. You have to control things going on the ground. And in that moment, you need to be doing rescue operations. You need to be saving people that are stuck on top of their roofs. You need to be recovering the remains of people so that their families can be notified. You need to be getting bottles of water to people, baby formula and diapers. Like that's what needs to happen. And when a president goes and does those types of things in that area, basically all of those things have to shut down in that exact moment. So let's just stop with the nonsense. There's nothing they can do. So let's stop thinking like it's a good idea that they go and survey. But since we don't live in that world, remember when people called George Bush a racist that hated black people because it took him like a couple of days before he got down to New Orleans to survey the damage after Hurricane Katrina? You remember that? People will still talk about that to this day. George Bush is racist. Well, how do you know? Well, it took him like 2 days to get down to New Orleans to even look at all these black people that were in plight. Freaking racist. He's basically the grand wizard of the KKK. Where's the outrage with Biden? Took him a week. Is it perhaps because we don't have equal weights and measures when it comes to how we view people because they either have an R by their name or a D by their name? Yeah, so you're not going to hear the mainstream media complaining about this. And again, I'm not complaining about it either. I don't give a crap if Joe Biden goes and looks at someone's damaged and destroyed house. I'd rather he not be there. He can look at videos, he can fly over it in the helicopter or something like that. He doesn't need to be on the ground. It just gums everything up. All right, next quick hitter here. The U.S. government warning it does not have enough funds to last through hurricane season. So this is according to ABC News on October the 2nd. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, can meet immediate needs, but does not have enough funding to make it through the hurricane season, Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas told reporters on Wednesday. The agency is being stretched as it works with states to assess damage from Hurricane Helene and deliver meals, water, generators, and other critical supplies. The storm struck Florida last week, then plowed through several states in the southeast, flooding towns and killing more than 160 people. Mayorkas was not specific about how much additional money the agency may need, but his remarks on Air Force One underscored concerns voiced by President Joe Biden and some lawmakers earlier this week that Congress may need to pass supplemental spending bills this fall to help states with recovery efforts. So, need to take a big drink before I do this one. Here's my big takeaway. We apparently don't have U.S. taxpayer money to assist U.S. taxpayers, but we apparently do have U.S. taxpayer money to assist non-U.S. taxpayers. Okay? So I went and looked up the countries that have received the most foreign aid from the United States, and I went back to the year 2022. Okay? We're not going to be able to get accurate stuff about 2024 and probably not last year either. But for 2022, this is according to the U.S. News and World Report. Ukraine in 2022 got $12.4 billion. The note on that one is since the beginning of the war with Russia, American taxpayers have given Ukraine upwards of $200 billion. $200 billion towards their war and relief efforts. Also, we've given $3.3 billion to Israel, $2.2 billion to Ethiopia, $1.4 billion to Afghanistan, $1.4 billion to Yemen, $1.4 billion to Egypt, $1.2 billion to Jordan, $1.2 billion to Nigeria, $1.2 million to Somalia, and $1.1 billion to South Sudan. And those aren't the only countries, guys. We are literally giving money to people hand over fist all over the globe. Now, to some of you conservatives, you're not going to really like this. I'm okay with foreign aid, actually. I am. Principally, I am okay with it. After you've taken care of the people inside of your country. Once the bridges and roads are fixed in your country, once, the people that are starving in your country are no longer starving, once the schools are fully funded, and I know there's issues with public school funding and all that stuff, I get it. Once the issues of your country are taken care of, I think it is a great idea to support other countries around the globe, especially countries that we want to keep our influence in and not the influence of communist China or Iran or Brazil, which is basically falling into a failed state, or North Korea or Russia or any of these places. I'm okay with it. That's not the world we live in right now. We have people that can't get look at Maui. You want to talk about something that left the headlines like a fart in the wind? When's the last time you heard about Maui? There are still people that are technically unaccounted for. There are places that the government is trying to usurp the rights of the landowners to take their very, very valuable land. Why has Maui not been rebuilt? Where's the money to rebuild Maui? Where's the money to make those families whole? Because of a disaster that was, a natural disaster, but partially caused by the ineptitude of the Democratic government of that area of Hawaii. Where's all this? But you're telling me that we have tens of billions of dollars to send to other countries around the globe when U.S. taxpayers are suffering? That's the world we're living in right now, guys. Again, remember these things when you enter the ballot box on November the 5th. All right, next one here. Pope Francis continuing to be a feckless heretic. This is according to the Christian Post. During a 3-day visit to Singapore, Pope Francis declared that all religions are a path to God. Yes, that's something he actually said, and that is the context. All religions are on a path to God, are a path to God, sparking backlash among religious leaders in the United States. The statement was made in an interreligious meeting with young people at a Catholic junior college shortly before his departure back to Rome. Departing from his prepared remarks, Francis spoke off the cuff, stating that different religions are like different languages to reach God. If you start to fight, my religion is more important than yours, mine is true and yours isn't, where will that lead us, he asked. According to Crux Now, there's only one God, and each of us has a language to arrive at God. Some are Sikh, some are Muslim, Hindu, Christian, and they are different paths to God. Guys, I shouldn't have to say this, but if you're a Protestant, obviously you don't need to pay attention to the words of the Pope. And if you're Catholic, this is part of the problem when we say you're looking at church tradition, the Pope, and the Bible as if they're on the same planes. Because when the Pope says something that doesn't jive with the Bible at all, who do you elevate? To whose authority do you appeal? So my big takeaway on this one is this is clearly universalism or religious pluralism, and I would expect nothing less from this Pope. Guys, if you take the Pope seriously in any way, shape, or form, I don't know what to tell you. He continues to signal things that are contrary, not just to Catholic doctrine, but to biblical Christianity in any form. He's basically saying, yeah, the Bible, the Word of God, I got it. But what I got to say is this. And guys, we're going to keep talking about it because he's going to keep saying these things. And I know some of you think that, it's no big deal. Like he's just the Pope, he's whatever. There are literally billions of people on the planet that hang on every word of this man. That's obviously very, very dangerous, and Satan is loving it. All right, next one here. Israel pulling off one of the most amazing missions in modern warfare history. This has to be a movie someday. This is according to the Daily Wire on September the 18th. Israel reportedly conducted a second wave of mass precision bombings against the Iranian-backed Hezbollah terrorist organization on Wednesday, detonating thousands of walkie-talkies used by the group. Israel blew up thousands of personal radios, which were used by Hezbollah leaders in Lebanon in a second wave of its intelligence operation, which started on Tuesday, with the explosions of Hezbollah pager devices, per two sources with knowledge, said Israel journalist Barak Ravid. He said the personal radios were booby-trapped in advance by Israeli intelligence services and then delivered to Hezbollah, were part of the militia's emergency communication system, which was supposed to be used during war with Israel, the sources said. The news comes after Israel wounded thousands of Hezbollah terrorists on Tuesday when it detonated pagers that they were using to communicate. The pagers were packed with a small amount of explosives and a switch that allowed them to be remotely detonated. The first wave of strikes injured approximately 4,000 people, including hundreds who were in critical condition, and at least a dozen others were killed. So after this all went down, maybe like a week later, Israel used a bunker buster rocket to kill the leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, who was also responsible for the Marine barracks bombings in Beirut that I recently talked about with Jack Carr. And the thing about it is, there were initial reports that these pagers that Hezbollah was going to be using for communication were actually intercepted by Israeli intelligence, and then they put all the explosives in there, and then they send them off to Hezbollah. It's actually even way cooler than that. The Israeli intelligence agencies thought, okay, one day these guys are going to be tired of us picking them off. They're going to realize they can't just be using iPhones out there. They're probably going to use some other things, maybe like pagers, walkie-talkies, something like that. So Israel created these companies. They created a beeper company and a walkie-talkie company, and then Hezbollah bought it. They literally bought these explosive pagers and walkie-talkies from the Israeli military and intelligence operations. It's just incredible, just an incredible feat, one of the best feats in modern intelligence. But my big takeaway on this one is I'm glad that Israel is doing what they have to do to keep themselves safe, even if that means thumbing their nose at the United States. Because every time Israel does something to protect themselves by going on the offense and taking care of people that are firing rockets into their country or planning more October 7th style attacks, the United States is like, oh, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, we really need to de-escalate, and we need a two-state solution, and we need just, fairies to rain down from the sky and to fill our bank accounts and our hearts with unicorn farts, and it's just going to be like, oh, this great thing. Israel's like, all right, screw you guys. We're not even going to ask you for permission. We're not going to tell you what we're going to do beforehand because you're just going to leak it to the Washington Post or some other left-wing outlet, and then they're going to be told what's going to happen beforehand. We're just going to take care of business. I'm fully in support of that. Let's go Israel. All right, next one here. Jill, not Joe Biden, running the first presidential cabinet meeting in almost a year. So according to Fox News, President Biden convened his cabinet on Friday. This was, roughly a month ago, for the first time in nearly a year. This time with First Lady Jill Biden joining him for the meeting. It was the first time the cabinet had met since October the 2nd of 2023. Jill Biden spoke about a White House initiative on women's health research before the president fielded a question about the escalating tensions in Israel and Lebanon. So here's the thing. Here's the optics of it. So if you've seen a cabinet meeting before, it's typically a big long table, and the president doesn't sit at the head of the table. He sits like right in the middle of the table, right? So everyone can kind of see him and hear him, right? But at the head of the table is Jill Biden. Joe Biden opens his cabinet meeting, again, for the first time in a year. For the first time in a year. As if there's not been things going on that the entire cabinet needed to know about or needed to discuss. He intros the meeting, and then he basically looks over at Jill and goes, hey, honey, how about you go ahead now. And then Jill takes over the meeting. Those were the optics. So the optics were not that Joe Biden was leading this cabinet meeting, but that Jill Biden was. So my biggest takeaway on this one is the least covered important story in the U.S. right now is that Joe Biden is still the sitting president of the United States, but he is simultaneously missing in action. This is incredible. I understand he's been replaced as the candidate, so he's kind of a lame duck right now before he's officially a lame duck after the November 5th election or something like that. But no one's talking about this. I know everyone's focused on Kamala Harris. The only Democrat anybody wants to talk about right now is Kamala Harris, but she's not the president. She has one of the most worthless jobs in the United States government for the most part, which is being vice president. Basically, her only job is to break a tie in the Senate, to take over if the president is incapacitated, or if the president becomes so incapacitated mentally that they can't continue their job by, invoking the amendment that would remove him from office. And she's certainly not doing that. But Joe Biden's the president. And for the last year, what has he been doing? When your cabinet's not even getting together to discuss business? Like, My goodness, this is just the world we live in, I guess. All right, guys, we made it all the way here to the end. So if you made it here to the end, I've got an extra fun thing for you. I'm assuming most of you have seen this at this point, but if you haven't, it's going to be an absolute treat, even if you're just listening to it. But the most unintentionally hilarious political advertisement in history just went down. So again, I think most of you have seen this. No, this is not an official Kamala Harris, Tim Walz campaign ad. Okay, this was not done by one of their PACs. This was done by a private citizen, a private party. But the thing about this, the thing about this ad is that it is intended to help the Harris-Walz ticket. It is intended to. So if you haven't seen this, or if you're watching it again, just remember the person that made this, the biggest thing they're wanting to do is to get men to vote for Kamala Harris for president. Kamala Harris is underwater with support from men right now. She can't even get support from black men, which no one thought would be happening right now. That's why they're freaking out. Just remember when you're watching this, this is supposed to get guys like you to vote for Kamala Harris. Let's go to the clip here.
I'm a man.
I'm a man.
I'm a man, man.
And I'm man enough.
I'm man enough to enjoy a barrel-proof bourbon.
Neat.
Man enough to cook my steak rare.
Man enough to deadlift 500, then braid the out of my daughter's hair.
You think I'm afraid to rebuild a carburetor? I eat carburetors for breakfast.
I ain't afraid of bears.
That's what bear hugs are for.
I'll tell you another thing I sure as shit am not afraid of. Women.
I'm not afraid of women.
I'm not afraid of women.
They want to control their bodies? I say go for it.
They want to use IVF to start a family? I'm not afraid of families.
They want to be childless cat ladies?
Have all the cats you want.
Woman wants to be president?
Well, I hope she has the guts to look me right in the eye and accept my full-throated endorsement.
Because I'm man enough to support women.
Man enough to know what kind of donuts I like.
Man enough to admit I'm lost, even when I refuse to ask for directions.
Man enough to not ban young women from reading Little Women.
Or one of those pants books that the sisters like.
I'm man enough to raw dog a flight. It sucked. Not worth it.
I'm man enough to be emotional in front of my wife.
In front of my kids.
In front of my horse. I'm man enough to tell you that I cry at Love Actually. Good Will Hunting.
West Side Story.
That and Predator.
And I'm sick of so-called men domineering, belittling, and controlling women just so they can feel more powerful. That's not how my mama raised me.
I love women.
I love women who support their families.
Women who decide not to have families.
Women who take charge.
And I'm man enough to help them win.
Yep. That's a real video that was made and put out on the internet. And again, the intention was to get dudes like me to be interested in stuff like that. So, the guy that made it, I can't remember the dude's name, apparently used to work for Jimmy Kimmel, which I get, Jimmy Kimmel hasn't been funny since, I don't know, was he ever funny? But he only came out afterwards to say, oh, this is satire. And it's satire against traditional masculinity, which if you have to explain the joke, if you have to explain that it's satire, then the satire is not very good because it kind of should be obvious. That's kind of the whole point of what makes satire funny. But again, that wasn't the main point. The main point wasn't to make a satirical point about traditional masculinity. It was to get like manly dudes to vote for Kamala Harris. So the people in the ad, apparently most of them are just, paid actors, if not all. I think all of them were paid actors. So, okay, whatever. But most of the men featured are either obese, effeminate, some were even a little lispy, and they don't really pass the smell test for what a normal, virile guy actually is. So I want to get into some of the dumbest and equally funniest parts of the ad. So, first of all, the skinny guy sitting on the bench press claiming that he can deadlift 500 pounds, that dude can't deadlift 500 pounds. Okay. I kind of have an idea what it takes to deadlift 500 pounds. Maybe that dude's got some superhuman strength, but typically tall, really skinny guys aren't deadlifting 500 pounds. It's not really like a deadlift body. Maybe that guy's a good runner, or maybe does CrossFit or plays basketball or pickleball or something like that. But that dude ain't deadlifting 500 pounds. But let's move past that. When they say, I'm not afraid of women, I'm not afraid of women, I'm not afraid of women, and they do that through the beginning part of that, who exactly is afraid of women in this context, precisely? Because for me and guys like me, I'm not afraid of women in politics as a category, as a macro category. I'm currently particularly afraid of a particular woman who happens to be a dum-dum who might end up in the White House. So I'm not talking about women in politics. I'm talking about a particular one who happens to be named Kamala Harris. Also, the most obviously gay of all the men featured in this little commercial, the one sitting on the truck bed like this. I find it hilarious that he was, I have to say it, okay? I do find it hilarious that he says full-throated endorsement. So there's that. But also, where these guys are, the one guy said, I'm man enough to not ban young women from reading Little Women. Like, who's trying to ban Little Women? Like, I've not heard that one. I do know that Christians and conservatives and Republicans are trying to ban, like, porn from middle school libraries. We're trying to ban books that, like, show kids giving each other blowjobs and stuff like that. We're trying to ban that. And the thing is those books aren't actually banned, because in all the states where we're removing them from the libraries, you can still buy them off Amazon and have them delivered to your doorstep, or go to your local Barnes and Noble and pick a copy of it up. So they're not banned. But Little Women, really? I get it. It's young women's, from reading Little Women, it kind of sounds good, but it's obviously kind of stupid. But also, the most obviously gay guy, again, the guy on the truck bed, he comes back with a vengeance towards the end with this quote: "I love women." As if he's saying it out loud to try to convince himself, but we'll leave that there. But guys, overall, the funniest thing about this ad is that it wasn't actually intended to be funny. Like, again, they said it was supposed to be satirical, and maybe it struck that chord a little bit. But the intent, the goal, was to put this out there to help the Kamala Harris and Tim Walz campaign, because they are underwater with men, especially with black men, which they never thought they'd have that problem in the Democratic Party. But they just can't get men excited about voting for Kamala Harris, and not because she's a woman, because she's a moron. But my big takeaway on this one is, if you are a man and an ad like this attracts you to vote for Kamala Harris, I have some questions. All right, guys, that'll do it for today, but we are going to do a quick resilience boost. At Undaunted.Life, our mission is equipping men to push back darkness with content that forges spiritual, mental, and physical resilience. So in the show notes, I've got the donation link. Again, guys, we need guys like you to hop on board to help us do everything that we do. And also, I've got all the links to everything I talked about in the quick hitters. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Wherever you're listening to this, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a positive 5-star review. If you want me to come speak live at your event or on your podcast, just shoot me an email to info@Undaunted.Life. That's info@Undaunted.Life. Follow us on Instagram and like us on Facebook, and check out our website for everything else, including how to donate to keep more content like this coming your way. Just go to www.Undaunted.Life. And as always, we want to thank the band Holy Name for allowing us to use their music for our content. The music on this podcast is their song Perpetua, which is off their self-titled debut album on Face Down Records. The links are in the description. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Remember, keep pushing back darkness, keep forging spiritual, mental, and physical resilience, keep seeking the Lion of Judah.